Okay, now the movie. I think the name was Starstruck. It's a Russian movie. It's on Prime. I watched the whole movie and it disappeared. I'm pretty sure it was Starstruck. It was a shocking movie. It was what they would call a cult movie. It was based upon the whole movie was symbolic. If you couldn't understand the symbols, you probably either didn't like the movie or walked out of the movie saying, "What was that all about?" I remember the first time that I saw Inception. I walked out of the movie theater. I think I was there with Lappy and Brooke, I think. I walked out of the movie theater saying, "What was that all about?" And now all I talk about is Inception, now that I understand what was going on there. So let me try and explain this movie to you. It was based upon fact. The movie said it was based upon fact. And I'll tell you this. The movie was made in 2020, and my understanding of the symbols is that the movie was an anti-communist movie. And it was a warning to anyone that would watch it in any country that would play it in their country. I'm really surprised that Prime would have a movie like that unless they didn't understand what it was all about. I don't know. It was, I have no problem watching foreign films. Some of them are really very good. I prefer English films. I have to be in the mood to be reading the captions. This movie was very difficult if anyone wants to watch it. It was very difficult. The dialogue was very rapid, and the font for the captions didn't play very well on the background of the movie, so I had to really concentrate to read it. But it was a cult movie, and it took place in Russia, obviously. I didn't know. I had to look up a couple of things to understand what was said. And I really didn't understand that the Russian Civil War had as many phases to it as it did. I didn't understand that. It had like wars within wars that ultimately led to the defeat of the Tsar and the existing government of Russia that was taken over by the Communist Party. And one of the battles was in Latvia. There were at the end, there were two armies, the white guard and the red guard. There were two Russian armies, the white guard and the red guard. The white guard was pro-Tsar, and the red guard were Russians that were pro-communist, because the communists that were warring against Russia were not all Russian, and the perpetrators, or the ones that started communism and started the rebellion, were German. Okay, I think one of them was living in America. I'm not sure, but they were. Marx was German. Okay, I don't want to say the wrong thing. They weren't Russian. They weren't Russian. They were Jewish, brother. They were Jewish, and I think some say that Lenin was not, but someone else says that he was too. That all of the leaders and the founders of communism were Jewish. It's just true. It's true. The foundation of the world communism movement to take over the whole world is Jewish. Okay. So this movie there was no way this movie was anti-Semitic. I'm just telling you the truth. Okay. So the movie is supposed to be based on truth. When the white guard So there was the Red Guards, German soldiers that were communists, that were working with the outside communists, which were basically German, okay, to bring down the government. And the White Guard was loyal to the Tsar, and the White Guard lost. So the movie takes place in Latvia, okay, where the White Guard are invited by the now communist government in Russia, saying, "Look, give up your arms, and we will deport you, or we'll dispose of you in some positive way." So they were all lining up to see the communist interviewer, okay, and the officers were commanded they had to take the epaulets off their uniforms. In other words, according to the Geneva Conventions, there were certain ways that you treat prisoners of war, and when you barrack them, if that's the right word, uh, they know who the officer is in the barracks, and the officer is expected to deal with the men, and sometimes the head of the prisoner of war camp will deal with the officer. Okay, but the communists were saying no more officers. Everyone's equal. You have to cut all your epaulets, all your insignia that would indicate that you're an officer. You have to cut it off of your uniform. No one can call you colonel anymore or captain anymore. It's not allowed. You're all equal. So they were all turning in their guns, cutting the epaulets off of their uniforms. And the movie, it was to me, it was a stroke of the cinematography was a stroke of genius. It was going back and forth between this group. It looked like a couple of hundred soldiers, okay, and one of them, through the whole movie, if you got rid of all the wallpaper, okay, he was saying, "How did this happen? How did this happen?" And he's remembering, okay, life in Russia before the war. Personally, I think he was hallucinating. Maybe part of his memory was true, but he was hallucinating. So the movie was flipping back and forth between this prisoner of war camp and all of these men talking, okay, and his being on a ship in Russia in a beautiful setting, and he sees this beautiful woman, and he just falls in love with this beautiful woman, okay, and he becomes obsessed with her. So I don't have any problem believing that he did have a memory of some beautiful woman, but it goes into a fantasy, which I think was a fantasy, that without them even talking to each other, okay, she goes ashore with him and spends the night with him. So I really think he was fantasizing, okay. But if you want to that's all wallpaper. He keeps saying, "How did this happen?" And the answer to how this happened is in the movie, okay. Well, it does show you this, that let me get back for a second to the communists interviewing all of the soldiers and telling them, "No, you can't be an officer anymore. You will have a commissar over you, and she is a woman, a Hungarian woman, and she's Jewish." So the commissars were largely Jewish. That's what, brethren, we have to face the truth. Okay? We have to face the truth. The communist takeover of Russia was largely Jewish. A lot of them were Jewish. The majority of them were Jewish. So she was, and do you think it was exaggerated? I don't know. I don't think it was exaggerated. She was a woman that was not womanly. Okay. Now, you need to relate this to what's happening in this country today. We've been under, the whole country, the whole population has been under a tremendous mind control, okay, to make everyone equal. Men have to get weaker, women have to get stronger, to deny sex, to make they're trying to undo thousands of years, if you want to look at it that way, because I tell you, this world is an illusion. Thousands of years of of how society has functioned in all different countries, men and men and women and women. They're trying to change what is biologically basic, what they're trying to change nature. It's unnatural. It's witchcraft. It's just unnatural, designed to destroy it. The bottom line is that underneath it all is a spiritual power that hates humanity and wants to destroy the human race. That's the bottom line. So there was nothing feminine about her at all. And she was dressed in an overcoat. Listen, brethren, every woman can make herself attractive. Every woman, there are ways to make yourself attractive. Either you play yourself up or you play yourself down. You do the best you can with what you've got. You know, she was totally plain, nothing on her, a male hat and a male coat, and screaming like a drill sergeant at the soldiers. Okay, and I don't think it was anti-Semitic at all. It was just a stated fact that the commissars were Jewish. You know, many of them were, not all of them. So the movie's flitting back and forth between the prisoner of war camp and this fantasy on a boat with all these wealthy people and the women dressed with their hats. And it was around 1918, I think. And he's a dashing officer in his white uniform, good-looking man. And that's all part of the wallpaper. So what do we have now that's not wallpaper? He keeps asking, how did this happen? Scene on this boat. It's like a party boat. It's like taking a cruise today. And there's a magician working. And he's doing tricks. And you see the audience, both adults and children, they're amazed at the sleight of hand that he's doing. Okay? Sleight of hand. And they're just mesmerized as he does his tricks. The messages that happened because the people were hypnotized by the magician. But then it's happening in this country today. So he has this trickster, okay? And then somehow the young soldier gets involved, and it was very slow moving. It was almost annoying me. It was so slow moving. But that was the message. They showed you the face of the people. They were amazed. They were just in awe at his tricks, and it disappeared, and then it came back again, you know. And the young soldier gets involved in it somehow, and the trickster does something wrong, and the soldier doesn't expose him. So the trickster winds up inviting the soldier for dinner. And the trickster says to him, well, have you read Marx? Okay, it's the second clue. Okay, what's happening here? Everybody's amazed by everybody has their eyes on the magician. Okay, and the magician, he's not fixed up now with his hat and everything. Have you read Marx? Oh, you haven't read Marx? And the young officer, okay, is gulping down his food. All he cares about is the food. All he cares about is the beautiful woman. All he cares about is the food. He's not interested in anything. And the magician is saying, oh, you don't know Marx? Oh, so you're not sophisticated. You haven't traveled abroad. You haven't been to Paris. You haven't been to Vienna. And the young soldier, all he wants is the food and the woman. And the magician starts explaining Marx to him, but not a brain cell working, you know. That who was this man? And he was German. He was German, okay. And the implication was that he was probably a German Jew, okay. Started teaching him Marx, okay, communist philosophy. But he wasn't interested. It didn't touch him. All he wanted was the woman. See? That's the second clue. I really need to listen to it again because something in that prisoner of war camp was said about Babylon. And I had a lot of trouble following that. It was in Russian. The captions were going very fast. And it was just one sentence. Somebody asked a question amongst the soldiers, and the answer was Babylon. Okay, that's another clue. Brethren, these are ancient gods that are trying to take down Christian society and bring the world back to the ancient gods. You know? And very few people, well, today more and more are awake. But there's one officer, he was the one that said Babylon. He knew what was going on, see. And there was one part that I missed there. He wound up getting murdered. Someone murdered this officer after he said to everybody, the new power. And this one man, they keep showing him, how did this happen? Now he's going back and forth from the prisoner of war camp to the boat. Okay, how did this happen? The new power. And he says, what do you mean the new power? What do you mean the new power? See, there's a new power, brethren. Countries used to fight. Okay, Spain fought with France. France fought with Italy. All of Europe was warring all the time. They were all Christian nations. Oh, Sheila, they were Catholic. They weren't Christian. They had a modicum, a foundation of Christian morality. They treated their prisoners of war humanely most of the time. At least that was expected. There were people that violated those rules, but it was expected that another human being, now you've defeated him, you at least feed him and treat him humanely. Even they even treated this, they even fed their slaves. Of course, there were people that violated those rules. So it's assumed that you treat your prisoners of war like human beings, that you feed them and give them some kind of shelter. And anything beyond that is abuse. So it just got hit in my mind. I was talking about the magician. Then I was telling you about Babylon. Okay, so he was saying there's a new power. This is not a Christian power. Do not expect from them what you would expect from a Christian conqueror. This conqueror is another power. No morality. The suggestion is it is an amoral power. So the captain is murdered in his bed. I'm not sure who murdered him. Maybe because he was telling the truth. And I call her Nurse Ratched. There used to be a movie with the Nurse Ratched in it that she was always telling people what to do. I don't know, but does anybody remember Nurse Ratched? Yeah. Well, that's what this commissar was like. So when one of the soldiers finds out that the colonel was killed, he said, oh, we will find out who did it. She says to him, who cares? In other words, here is a prisoner of war saying someone was murdered and we'll find out who did it. It was one of our own men. We'll find out who did it. And she said, who cares? And he says, what? She says, who cares who did it? And she makes the announcement to the group saying, Colonel so-and-so died from a heart attack in his sleep. In other words, she announced that he died and she just made up how he died. She didn't want any investigation. She didn't want any justice. She wasn't interested in anything like that at all. The suggestion is amoral. There is a new power, but it's not a new power. It's an ancient power. It's from Babylon, and it hates human beings, but especially Christians. And then there were other symbols. I'll tell you the end of the story so you can go with me if you want to. She drowned them all. She lied to them. They were told they were being deported to another country. They left. They boarded the ship singing, it's a good thing to be an Orthodox Christian. You heard their conversation that Jesus, whether the Russian people are a religious people, I believe they still are today, but they were a religious people. Everybody went to church. Jesus was in their everyday conversation. Russian Orthodox, yes. Errors in their doctrine, yes. Pictures of Jesus, yes. But brethren, you don't have a mentality where Jesus is in your everyday conversation. I don't care how messed up your doctrine is, but the Lord doesn't honor that. Does anyone not know what I'm talking about? It was clear in the movie. Jesus was in their everyday conversation. Without foundational righteousness, we'll find out who did the murder and he'll be punished. And they believed everything these communists were telling them. They walked onto the boat like lambs to the slaughter. And she sunk the boat and drowned them. She looked through her binoculars. It's supposed to be a true story. That's the power that's trying to take over America today. So the movie went on, and it was a little bizarre because it was exaggerated in a couple of places, um, to indicate that this young, handsome officer, brave officer, okay, when he wasn't actually on a traditional battlefield, was only interested in a woman and food. And he winds up stranded, and he winds up in a relationship with this young boy. Okay? Now here's another clue. The young boy says to him, "You know, we had a teacher come here recently, and the officer, all he could think about is this woman." And the little boy saying to him, "Yes, he's teaching us that we don't come from God, that God didn't make us, that we come from the apes." And it was a little boy is looking up at him. "What do you think?" And the soldier says, "Oh, don't talk about that nonsense." And all he could think about is this woman. So the magician comes to him and tells him. He witnesses the whole room of people being absolutely mesmerized by the magician. Okay, while the magician switches the whatever he switched. Okay, okay. So the magician's telling him about Marxism. The little boy's telling him about the tearing down of the Christian faith. Okay, and the little boy, he won't drop it, and the soldier's annoyed at him. And the little boy is saying, "I don't know about being coming from apes. Can you imagine the czar came from apes and the priest came from apes?" And the little boy can't believe it, and he really wants to talk about it. And the elder doesn't want to talk about it. He thinks it's fantasy and nonsense. So that's everything else was wallpaper in the movie. The question is, what happened? Did you see the Marxism doctrine when it came in? Okay, the philosophical doctrine, Marx. Did you see the Antichrist doctrine that came into the church? Did you see that? Okay. Were you looking at the magician, or were you looking at what was going on when the magician wasn't looking? And I think it was that soldier, that officer that was killed, that when he said it's another power, he was trying to tell them, don't trust them. They say they're going to deport you to another country. Don't trust them. Something's wrong. And they killed him because they didn't want any rebellion. They all filed onto the ship like sheep going to the slaughter. Why? Because they believed that the communist power was like they were, that they would have never, the czar with all of his faults, and he was the czar that was in power at the time of the Russian Revolution. From what I understand, he was not a very good czar. And the Russian people, the peasants, were really suffering, and he didn't care very much. He was only concerned with his family. That's my understanding. He was only concerned with his family. He wasn't concerned with the people. And the people were rioting and starving. I don't know if they were rioting, but they were starving and protesting. And he just wanted his family. So that whole upper class, the suggestion was, that had the power to resist, were just in their own little world. When the enemy came in, just like in my dream, the enemy came in, nobody saw the enemy come in. And while they weren't looking, the power changed. And now you're all filing onto that ship, believing this power that they're actually going to deport you. And they're drowning you like rats. And that's what's happening here.